Another in a series of presidential profiles, William McKinley, 25th President of the United States.
At the beginning of the 19th century, there was not a mile of steam railroad on the globe. Now, there are enough miles to make its circuit many times. Then, there was not a line of electric telegraph. Now we have a vast mileage traversing all lands and seas. God and man have linked the nations together. Isolation is no longer possible or desirable. The period of exclusiveness is past.
America was crossing the threshold of the 20th century, no longer able to remain an isolationist in a shrinking world. William McKinley, the last of the Civil War veterans to hold office and the first president of the new century, launched the United States into its new role as a world power. McKinley was born in Ohio in 1843, the third youngest in a family of 9 children. Forced to withdraw from college due to poor health, McKinley worked briefly as a school teacher. Then in 1861, the guns of the South opened fire on Fort Sumter, and the Great Civil War was on. The 18-year-old McKinley, like many other boys his age, enlisted in the Army.
We counted no cost when the war commenced. We knew little of the great sacrifices which were to come, or the scope and extent of that great war. We only knew that the Union was threatened with overthrow. We only knew that the nation of our fathers was in danger by the hand of treason. We went forward with firm resolve to give up all, even the last drop of life's precious blood, that this nation should be saved.
Serving with distinction, McKinley rose through the ranks from private to major during the war. When the Confederacy collapsed in 1865, McKinley resigned his commission and returned home to practice law and take part in local politics. At the age of 34, he was elected to Congress, where he served for the next 14 years. During his years in the House of Representatives, McKinley became a leading supporter of high protective tariffs. He believed that American goods and labor must be protected from the cheaper imports from abroad.
Reduce the tariff, and labor is the first to suffer. He who would break down the manufacturers of this country strikes a fatal blow at labor. It is our duty to protect as sacredly and assuredly the labor and industry of the United States as we would protect her honor from taint or her territory from invasion.
During McKinley's years in Congress, the problems of Reconstruction continued to haunt the nation. Northern politicians still thirsted for revenge. Southerners tried to return to their pre-war way of life. Negroes were free only in theory. They lived in fear for their lives from terrorist bands such as the Ku Klux Klan. McKinley, while less radical than some of his colleagues, still demanded that the rights guaranteed by the 14th Amendment must be enforced. Otherwise, said McKinley, the Civil War had been fought in vain.
The war is over. The flag of the lost and wicked cause went down at Appomattox more than 20 years ago. But that does not prevent us from insisting that all that was gained in war shall not be lost in peace. The struggle cost too much human life and public treasury to be frittered away under any pretext. There is no room for compromise.
But still, the question of tariffs remained the nation's prime concern, and McKinley continued to push for high protective taxes on imported goods. McKinley's theory of protective tariff was grounded in the simplicity of his own life. He had little formal economic training. He cared nothing for classroom theories. He believed in the common man, not the so-called experts.
I would rather have my economic theories founded upon the everyday experience of the peddler or the potter than the learning of the professor, or the farmer and the factory hand, rather than the college faculty.
And in 1896, when depression swept the country, the voters turned for help to the friend of the common man and elected William McKinley, the 25th President of the United States. Return to prosperity had been William McKinley's campaign slogan, and he set out to fulfill his pledge upon assuming the presidency. He called Congress into a special session and pushed through the highest protective tariff in the country's history. Only by speedy action such as this, said McKinley, could the nation return to the good way of life.
The responsibilities of the high trust to which I have been called, always of grave importance, are increased by the prevailing business conditions, entailing idleness upon willing labor and loss to useful enterprises. The country is suffering from industrial disturbances from which speedy relief must be had.
But in reality, the Depression had already run its course, and the country was well on the road to recovery when McKinley took office. Suddenly, the public's eye shifted from domestic problems to a growing international crisis on the island of Cuba. Revolutionaries in Cuba had risen up against their Spanish rulers, and the lengthy struggle had brought with it starvation and disease for the Cuban people. A growing resentment against Spain began to build in America, and the drum roll of war was heard across the country. McKinley sought to maintain peace. He desperately wanted to avoid war.
If war comes, it isn't the money that will be spent, nor the property that will be destroyed that concerns me, but the thought of human suffering that must come into thousands of homes throughout the country is almost overwhelming.
In February 1898, to protect American lives and property in Cuba, McKinley sent the battleship Maine into the Havana harbor. And then disaster struck as the ship exploded in a horrendous blast that killed 266 Americans. Although there was no evidence to support the accusation, Spain was blamed for the tragedy. Public resentment reached a fever point, and "Remember the Maine" became a national war cry. 2 months later, unable to resist the pressure any longer, McKinley declared war against Spain.
I ask the Congress to authorize and empower the President to take measures to secure a full and final termination of hostilities between the government of Spain and the people of Cuba, and to secure in the island the establishment of a stable government, and to use the military and naval forces of the United States as may be necessary for these purposes.
In the 100 days of war that followed, the might and power of the United States became firmly established in the eyes of the world. Spanish warships fleeing out of Santiago Harbor in Cuba were completely destroyed. Teddy Roosevelt led his Rough Riders in a cavalry charge up San Juan Hill. Commodore Dewey steamed into Manila with 6 warships and took the Philippines without losing a single ship or man. Puerto Rico was captured by General Miles. The victory was overwhelmingly decisive, and Spain asked for terms of armistice. The Spanish-American War was over.
To those who gained this complete triumph, the earnest and lasting gratitude of the nation is unsparingly due. Nor should we alone remember the gallantry of the living. The dead claim our tears, and our losses teach us to weigh the awful cost of war. However rightful the cause, or signal the victory.
In the election campaign of 1900, President Mckinley chose war hero Teddy Roosevelt as his running mate. Their platform stressed continued prosperity and the full dinner pail. 6 months after being returned to office, an assassin's bullet ended William McKinley's life, and the dominant personality of Teddy Roosevelt carried America's banner into the 20th century. But the American giant had come of age under the administration of William McKinley. The war with Spain had launched the nation's entry into world affairs. It was an ironic twist of fate that war would establish McKinley's place in history. For William McKinley, to his last breath, was a man of peace.
Let us ever remember that our interest is in concord, not conflict, and that our real eminence rests in the victories of peace, not those of war. Our earnest prayer is that God will graciously vouchsafe prosperity, happiness, and peace to all our neighbors, and bestow like blessings to all the peoples and powers on earth.